The Wyoming wind carried the scent of sage and distant rain as Marcus Hawthorne guided his weathered pickup truck down the gravel road toward the Riverside Diner. At 43, he'd grown accustomed to the solitude of ranch life, but today felt different. The call he'd received 3 days ago still echoed in his mind, a desperate voice belonging to someone named Danny Collins, claiming he had a business proposition that could benefit them both. Marcus pulled into the diner's parking lot, his boots crunching on the loose gravel as he stepped out. The establishment looked as tired as he felt, its faded red paint peeling under the relentless High Plains sun. Through the dusty windows, he could see the familiar checkered tablecloths and the same old jukebox that had been playing the same country songs since the 80s. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of coffee and fried food. Marcus scanned the nearly empty dining room until his eyes settled on a young man hunched over a corner booth, nervously tapping his fingers against a coffee cup. Danny Collins was younger than Marcus had expected, maybe 25, with hollow cheeks and the kind of restless energy that came from desperation. "Mr. Hawthorne." Danny stood up quickly, extending a trembling hand. His clothes were wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes that suggested he hadn't slept in days. "That's me." Marcus shook the offered hand, noting the weakness of the grip. "You said you had something important to discuss." They sat across from each other in the worn vinyl booth, and Marcus studied the younger man carefully. Danny's eyes darted around the diner, never settling on one place for too long. Whatever he was about to propose, it was eating him alive. "I know this might sound crazy," Danny began, his voice barely above a whisper, "but I heard you were looking for help around your ranch, someone who could live there, help with the house and cooking and such." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "I put that ad in the paper months ago. Didn't get any serious responses." "Well, I might have someone." Danny's hands shook as he reached for his coffee. "My sister, Emma, she's real good with domestic stuff. Learned from our mom before she passed." "Where is she now?" Danny's face darkened. "That's the thing, Mr. Hawthorne. We've had some hard times. Real hard times. I got into some trouble with the wrong people, and now I owe money I don't have." He paused, swallowing hard. "I need $5,000 and I need it fast." Marcus leaned back in his seat, understanding beginning to dawn on him. "What exactly are you proposing, son?" "Emma needs a place to stay and you need help around the ranch. I'm thinking, if you could pay me the $5,000 up front, she could work for you for a year. Room and board and whatever small wage you think is fair." The words hung in the air like smoke. Marcus felt his stomach tighten with disgust. "You're talking about selling your sister." "It's not like that," Danny's voice cracked. "She'll be safe with you. I've heard about you around town. You're a good man, Mr. Hawthorne. And she needs to get away from where we're living now. It's not safe for her." Marcus studied Danny's face, seeing the desperation there, but also something else. Genuine fear. "What kind of trouble are you in?" Danny glanced around the diner again before leaning closer. "I borrowed money from some people in Cheyenne. They're not the kind to forgive and forget. They've been coming around asking about Emma, making suggestions about how I could work off my debt." The implication made Marcus's blood run cold. "How old is your sister?" 21. "She's been taking care of me since our parents died in a car accident 3 years ago. I've been nothing but trouble for her, and now—" Danny's voice broke. "Now I've put her in danger." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, processing what he'd heard. The whole situation felt wrong, but he couldn't shake the image of a young woman in danger because of her brother's mistakes. "Where is she now?" "In my truck outside. She doesn't know about the money part. She just knows I found her a job on a ranch, that it would be safer for her than staying in the city." Marcus stood up abruptly. "I want to meet her." They walked outside together, where a rusted blue pickup truck sat parked under the shade of a cottonwood tree. Through the passenger window, Marcus could see a young woman with long dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She was reading a worn paperback book, completely absorbed in the story. As they approached the truck, she looked up, and Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Emma Collins had the kind of beauty that seemed almost out of place in the harsh landscape of Wyoming. Delicate features and clear green eyes that held a mixture of intelligence and wariness. But it was the sadness in those eyes that struck him most, a deep exhaustion that seemed to weigh down her slender shoulders. Danny tapped on the window, and Emma rolled it down. "Emma, this is Mr. Hawthorne. He's the rancher I told you about." Emma smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Hawthorne. Danny says you might have work for me." Her voice was soft, with a slight tremor that suggested she was more nervous than she was letting on. Marcus noticed the way she kept glancing at her brother, as if seeking reassurance. "Why don't you step out so we can talk properly?" Marcus suggested gently. Emma climbed out of the truck and Marcus was struck by how small she seemed. She couldn't have been more than 5'4", and her clothes, a simple blue dress and worn sneakers, hung loose on her frame, suggesting she hadn't been eating well. "Danny tells me you're interested in ranch work," Marcus said, keeping his tone neutral. "Yes, sir, I can cook, clean, do laundry. Clean, do. I helped my mum run our household before she passed, and I've been taking care of Danny and myself since then." Emma's voice grew stronger as she spoke about her abilities. "I'm not afraid of hard work." Marcus nodded, studying her face. There was something about Emma that reminded him of the wild horses he sometimes saw on his property, beautiful and strong, but ready to bolt at the first sign of danger. "The work would be live-in. You'd have your own room, and I'd provide meals and a small wage." "That sounds wonderful," Emma said, genuine relief flooding her voice. "We've been staying in a motel in Cheyenne, and it's not ideal." Danny shifted uncomfortably beside them. "Mr. Hawthorne, about that other matter we discussed." Emma looked between them, confusion crossing her features. "What other matter?" Marcus felt sick. He looked at Danny, then at Emma, and made a decision that would change all their lives. "Emma, why don't you wait in the diner? Order whatever you'd like. Danny and I need to finish our conversation." After Emma disappeared inside, Marcus turned to Danny with barely controlled anger. "I don't like this. Not one bit. I know how it sounds, but it sounds like you're selling your sister to pay off gambling debts." Danny's face crumpled. "I don't have any other choice. These people, they'll hurt her, Mr. Hawthorne. They've already made it clear that they're interested in her. If I don't pay them back, they'll take her anyway, and she'll end up in a situation that's 1,000 times worse than working on your ranch." Marcus ran a hand through his graying hair. "Why should I believe you care about her welfare when you're willing to trade her like livestock?" "Because I love her," Danny's voice broke. "She's the only family I have left, and I've destroyed her life. This is the only way I can think of to keep her safe." Marcus studied the younger man's face, seeing the genuine anguish there. "If I agree to this insanity, what happens to you?" "I'll disappear, leave Wyoming, start over somewhere else. As long as Emma's safe, that's all that matters." "And you think abandoning her with a stranger is going to keep her safe?" Danny met his eyes for the first time. "I think you're a good man, Mr. Hawthorne. I've asked around about you. People say you're fair, that you treat everyone with respect. That's more than I can say for the people who are after us." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, watching Emma through the diner window. She was sitting alone in a booth, staring out at the vast Wyoming landscape with an expression of resigned sadness. Something about her reminded him of his late wife, Sarah, who had died in a riding accident 5 years ago. Sarah had that same quiet strength, that same ability to find beauty in harsh circumstances. "If I do this," Marcus said finally, "it's not because I'm buying her. It's because I'm protecting her from you and the mess you've made." Danny's shoulders sagged with relief. "Thank you, Mr. Hawthorne. Thank you. Don't thank me yet." Marcus's voice was cold. "Because if you ever come around my ranch, if you ever try to contact her or cause her any more trouble, I'll make sure you regret it. Do we understand each other?" "Yes, sir." Marcus pulled out his checkbook, his hands shaking slightly as he wrote out the amount, $5,000, more money than he'd spent on anything other than ranch equipment in years. As he tore off the check and handed it to Danny, he felt like he was making a deal with the devil. "There's one more thing," Marcus said. "Emma doesn't know about the money, and she's never going to know. As far as she's concerned, I hired her because I need help, and you're leaving town to look for work. If you ever tell her the truth about this arrangement, the deal is off." Danny nodded eagerly, clutching the check. "I won't say anything, I promise." They walked back into the diner together where Emma was sitting quietly, her hands folded in her lap. She looked up as they approached, hope and fear warring in her green eyes. "Well?" she asked softly. Marcus sat down across from her, his heart heavy with the weight of what he'd just agreed to. "The job is yours if you want it. Room and board, plus $100 a week." Emma's face lit up with the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. "Really? Oh, thank you, Mr. Hawthorne. You don't know how much this means to me. There's just one thing," Marcus continued, hating himself for the deception. "The job starts immediately. Today, actually. I need to get back to the ranch, and if you're coming with me, we should leave soon." Emma's smile faltered slightly. "Today? But I haven't had a chance to say goodbye to Danny properly." Danny reached across the table and took her hand. You know I'm not much for long goodbyes. Besides, I'm leaving town tonight anyway. Got a lead on a job in Colorado." "Colorado?" Emma's voice was small. "How long will you be gone?" "I don't know." Could be a while, but you'll be safe with Mr. Hawthorne, and that's what matters." Emma nodded, but Marcus could see the tears forming in her eyes. "I guess this is it then." Danny stood up abruptly. "I'll get your things from the truck." As Danny walked away, Emma turned to Marcus with a shaky smile. "I'm sorry, this is all happening so fast. I guess I'm just nervous about starting over again." Marcus felt a stab of guilt. "It's natural to be nervous, but I want you to know that you'll be safe on my ranch. I give you my word." Emma studied his face, and Marcus hoped she could see the sincerity there, even if she couldn't know the whole truth. "Thank you, Mr. Hawthorne. I can see why Danny trusts you." Outside, Danny was pulling a single battered suitcase from the truck bed. Marcus watched through the window as the young man stood there for a moment, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Whatever else Danny Collins might be, he genuinely loved his sister. When Danny returned, he hugged Emma tightly. "Take care of yourself, Em, and remember, I love you." "I love you too, Danny. Please be careful." Marcus watched the goodbye with a heavy heart, knowing that Emma had no idea this might be the last time she ever saw her brother. As Danny drove away in his rusted truck, Emma stood in the parking lot, watching until he disappeared over the horizon. "Ready?" Marcus asked gently. Emma picked up her suitcase and nodded. "Ready." As they drove toward the Hawthorne Ranch, Emma stared out at the endless Wyoming landscape. "It's beautiful here," she said softly. "So different from the city." Marcus glanced at her, noting the way her fingers were clasped tightly in her lap. "Have you ever lived on a ranch before?" "No, but I've always wanted to. My dad used to tell me stories about growing up on his grandfather's farm in Nebraska. He said there was something peaceful about being surrounded by all that space and quiet." "Your dad was right. There's something healing about this land." Emma was quiet for a moment. "Mr. Hawthorne, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why did you decide to hire me?" "I mean, you don't really know anything about me." Marcus chose his words carefully. "Sometimes you meet someone and you just know they're good people. Your brother loves you very much. That was obvious. And you've been taking care of him since your parents died. That tells me a lot about your character." Emma smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. "I hope I can be the kind of help you need." "I'm sure you will be." As they turned onto the dirt road leading to the ranch, Marcus felt the weight of what he'd done settling on his shoulders. He'd paid $5,000 for a young woman who had no idea she'd been sold by her own brother. But looking at Emma's face as she took in the sight of the ranch, the way her eyes lit up at the sight of the horses grazing in the pasture, the genuine smile that crossed her features as she saw the old farmhouse, Marcus knew he'd made the right choice. Whatever the circumstances that brought Emma Collins to his ranch, he was going to make sure she found the safety and peace she deserved. And maybe, just maybe, they could both find a way to heal from the loneliness that had defined their lives for too long. The sun was setting behind the mountains as they pulled up to the house, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Emma stepped out of the truck and took a deep breath of the clean mountain air. "Welcome home, Emma," Marcus said quietly. She turned to look at him, and for the first time since he'd met her, there was hope in her green eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Hawthorne, for everything." Marcus nodded, carrying her suitcase toward the house. Behind them, the first stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled its lonely song across the vast Wyoming plains. The morning sun cast long shadows across the ranch house kitchen as Emma stood at the window, watching Marcus work with the horses in the corral. 3 days had passed since her arrival, and she was still adjusting to the rhythm of ranch life. The silence here was different from the city, not empty but full of natural sounds that seemed to speak of permanence and peace. She'd woken before dawn, a habit formed from years of caring for Danny, and had quietly explored the house. The kitchen was spacious, but clearly belonged to a man who cooked only out of necessity. The cabinets held basic supplies, and the refrigerator contained little more than eggs, milk, and leftover takeout containers. It was obvious Marcus had been managing on his own for a long time. Emma had found coffee and was attempting to figure out the ancient coffee maker when she heard boots on the porch. Marcus entered through the back door, removing his worn cowboy hat and hanging it on a peg by the entrance. His graying hair was pressed flat from the hat, and there were already sweat stains on his blue work shirt despite the early hour. "Morning," he said quietly, seeming almost surprised to find her in the kitchen. "Good morning, Mr. Hawthorne. I was trying to make coffee, but this machine is a bit of a mystery to me." Emma gestured helplessly at the complex-looking contraption on the counter. Marcus almost smiled. "That old thing's been giving me trouble for years. Here, let me show you." He moved to stand beside her, and Emma caught the scent of leather and hay that seemed to cling to him. The trick is to hold down this button while you turn the dial. Sarah, my wife, she was the only one who could make it work properly. Emma watched his hands as he demonstrated, noting the way his expression softened when he mentioned his wife. How long has she been gone? 5 years this September. Marcus's voice was matter-of-fact, but Emma heard the pain beneath it. Riding accident. Her horse spooked during a storm, threw her against a fence post. I'm so sorry. Emma's voice was barely above a whisper. You must miss her terribly. Marcus was quiet for a moment, focusing intently on the coffee maker. This ranch was her dream as much as mine. She loved every inch of it. The horses, the land, even the old house with all its quirks. After she died, I kept thinking I should sell, move somewhere smaller, but I couldn't bring myself to leave. The coffee maker gurgled to life, filling the kitchen with its familiar aroma. Emma found herself studying Marcus's profile, noting the lines around his eyes that spoke of years spent squinting into the sun, and the way his shoulders carried the weight of solitude. What was she like? Emma asked softly. Marcus glanced at her, and for the first time since she'd arrived, his expression was completely open. She was light. Does that make sense? She had this way of finding joy in the smallest things, a perfect sunset, a new foal, the first wildflowers in spring. She could make this old house feel like the center of the world. Emma nodded, understanding completely. My mother was like that. She used to say that happiness wasn't something you found, it was something you created wherever you were. Smart woman. Marcus pulled 2 mugs from the cabinet. What happened to your parents, if you don't mind me asking? Emma's hands tightened around the edge of the counter. Car accident on Interstate 80. They were driving home from visiting my aunt in Nebraska. It was winter, roads were icy. She trailed off, the familiar pain settling in her chest. I'm sorry, Emma. That must have been devastating. It was. But Danny and I had each other, and for a while that was enough. Emma's voice grew smaller. I just wish I'd been better at taking care of him. Maybe if I'd pushed him to get help sooner, or been stricter about his drinking. Marcus set a steaming mug in front of her, his expression gentle but firm. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved, Emma. I learned that the hard way with my own brother. Emma looked up at him, surprised by the understanding in his voice. You have a brother? Had. Tommy was 2 years younger than me, and I spent most of my adult life trying to clean up his messes. Gambling, drinking, bad investments, you name it. I bailed him out more times than I can count, always thinking the next time would be different. Marcus sat down across from her at the small kitchen table. He died in a bar fight in Denver about 10 years ago, drunk, arguing over a card game that didn't matter. I'm so sorry, Marcus. Emma realized she'd used his first name without thinking, but he didn't seem to mind. Point is, I understand the guilt you're carrying, but you can't blame yourself for Danny's choices. You did everything you could. Emma sipped her coffee, finding it surprisingly good. Sometimes I wonder if I enabled him, made it too easy for him to avoid responsibility. Maybe you did. Maybe I did too with Tommy, but we did it because we loved them, and that's not something to be ashamed of. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the morning light creep across the kitchen floor. Emma felt something loosening in her chest, a tension she'd carried for so long, she'd forgotten what it felt like to be without it. So, Marcus said eventually, what would you like to do today? I know you said you were good with domestic work, but I don't want you to feel like you have to dive into everything at once. Emma looked around the kitchen, taking in the dishes stacked in the sink, the dusty surfaces, the general air of neglect that came from a man living alone. If you don't mind, I'd like to start here. This kitchen has good bones, but it needs some attention. Marcus followed her gaze and had the grace to look embarrassed. I'm not much of a housekeeper. Sarah used to tease me about it. My mother always said a kitchen was the heart of a home. If you take care of it, it'll take care of you. Emma stood up, already mentally cataloging what needed to be done. Would it be all right if I went into town later? I'd like to get some groceries, maybe some supplies for cleaning. Of course, I'll give you money for whatever you need and you can take the truck. Marcus paused. Actually, would you mind if I came with you? I need to pick up some feed and I should probably introduce you around town. People here are good folks, but they're curious about newcomers. Emma felt a flutter of nervousness. What should I tell them? About why I'm here? The truth, mostly. You're working as my housekeeper, helping me get the place back in order. That's all anyone needs to know. Later that morning, they drove into Cedar Ridge, the nearest town to the ranch. It was the kind of place Emma had imagined when she'd dreamed of small-town life. A main street lined with family-owned businesses, American flags hanging from every porch, and the kind of quiet that spoke of deep roots and long histories. Their first stop, was Miller's General Store, where Marcus introduced Emma to Bill Miller, a heavy-set man in his 60s who seemed to know everyone in town. Bill looked Emma over with friendly curiosity, asking gentle questions about where she'd come from and what she thought of Wyoming so far. "Marcus here's been rattling around that ranch by himself for too long," Bill said with a grin. "About time he got some help. Sarah always said that place needed a woman's touch." Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I'm just here to help with the housework, Mr. Miller." "Course you are," Bill said, but his eyes twinkled with amusement. "Marcus, you make sure this young lady gets everything she needs. We'll put it all on your account." As they moved through the store, Emma was struck by how everyone seemed to know Marcus and how they all spoke of him with genuine respect and affection. The mechanic asked about his truck, the postmaster mentioned a package that had arrived, and the librarian invited them both to a church social the following weekend. "They're very kind," Emma said, as they loaded groceries into the truck. "Small towns are like that. Sometimes it feels like you can't sneeze without everyone knowing about it. But when you need help, there's always someone willing to lend a hand." Their next stop was the feed store, where Marcus introduced Emma to Jim Patterson, a weathered man who owned the largest ranch in the county. Jim's wife, Margaret, was there too, and she immediately took Emma under her wing. "Oh, honey, you're just what Marcus needs," Margaret said, her voice warm with genuine affection. "That man's been living like a hermit for too long. I've been telling him for years that he needed to find himself a nice girl and settle down again." Emma felt her cheeks burn. "Mrs. Patterson, I'm just what he needs," Margaret interrupted with a knowing smile. "Trust me, dear. I've been married to Jim for 37 years. I know what loneliness looks like, and I know what it looks like when it starts to lift." As they drove home, Emma found herself stealing glances at Marcus. His hands were steady on the steering wheel, his profile calm and strong against the backdrop of the Wyoming landscape. She tried to ignore the flutter in her stomach when she thought about Margaret's words. "I hope Mrs. Patterson didn't make you uncomfortable," Marcus said, as if reading her thoughts. "A little," Emma admitted. "I don't want people to get the wrong impression about why I'm here." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Emma, I want you to know that you're safe here. I hired you because I needed help, and because I could see you needed a place to land. But I would never take advantage of your situation or expect anything from you beyond what we agreed on." Emma felt tears prick her eyes at the kindness in his voice. "Thank you, Marcus. That means more to me than you know." When they arrived back at the ranch, Emma threw herself into cleaning the kitchen with an energy born of gratitude and determination. She scrubbed every surface until it gleamed, organized the cabinets, and stocked the refrigerator with fresh food. By evening, the kitchen looked like a different room entirely. Marcus stood in the doorway, surveying her work with amazement. "Emma, this is incredible. I'd forgotten what this room could look like." Emma wiped her hands on a dish towel, pleased with the results. "It's a beautiful kitchen. It just needed some love. Sarah would have loved what you've done here." Marcus's voice was soft, but there was no sadness in it, only warmth. That evening, Emma cooked dinner for both of them, the first real meal the kitchen had seen in years. They ate by candlelight, talking about the ranch, the town, and their shared love of old movies. Emma found herself laughing for the first time in months, and when she caught Marcus smiling at her across the table, she felt something shift in her chest. As she lay in bed that night, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling around her, Emma allowed herself to admit what she'd been trying to ignore all day. She was developing feelings for Marcus Hawthorne, feelings that went far beyond gratitude for his kindness. It was dangerous territory, she knew. She was here because she had nowhere else to go, and he was still grieving his wife. But in the darkness of her room, surrounded by the peace of the Wyoming night, Emma couldn't bring herself to regret the warmth that had begun to bloom in her heart. Outside her window, an owl called across the prairie, and Emma smiled as she drifted off to sleep, feeling safer than she had in years. 6 weeks had passed since Emma's arrival at the ranch, and the transformation was remarkable. The house that had once felt like a monument to loneliness now hummed with life. Fresh flowers from Emma's newly planted garden graced the kitchen table, the windows sparkled in the morning sun, and the smell of home-cooked meals filled the air each evening. Marcus found himself looking forward to the end of each workday, knowing Emma would be waiting with dinner and stories about her day. She'd taken to helping with some of the lighter ranch work, feeding the chickens, tending the vegetable garden, and even learning to groom the gentler horses. Her laughter had become the soundtrack of the ranch, and Marcus couldn't remember the last time he'd felt so content. Emma, too, had found a peace she'd never known. The constant worry that had defined her life with Danny had slowly melted away, replaced by a sense of purpose and belonging. She'd grown closer to Marcus with each passing day, and though neither had spoken of it directly, she could feel the electricity between them whenever their hands brushed or their eyes met across the dinner table. It was a Tuesday morning when everything changed. Emma was in the kitchen, humming as she prepared lunch, when she heard the unmistakable sound of a vehicle approaching the house. Through the window, she saw a battered sedan pulling up the drive, its engine knocking and sputtering. Her heart stopped when she recognized the driver. Danny climbed out of the car, looking even worse than when she'd last seen him. His clothes were dirty and ill-fitting. His face was gaunt, and there was a desperate wildness in his eyes that made Emma's blood run cold. She met him on the porch, her hands trembling as she gripped the railing. "Danny? What are you doing here?" Her brother's face crumpled when he saw her. "Em, thank God, I've been driving all night trying to find this place." He moved toward her, but Emma instinctively stepped back. "You look terrible. Are you all right?" "I'm in trouble, Em, real trouble." Danny's voice was shaking. "The people I owe money to, they found me in Colorado. They're coming for me, and when they can't find me, they're going to come looking for you." Emma felt the world tilt around her. "What do you mean? You said you were going to pay them back. You said you had a job." "I lied." Danny's voice broke. "I never found work. I spent the money on—" He stopped, unable to meet her eyes. "What money?" Emma's voice was barely a whisper. Danny's face went white. What money, Danny?" Before he could answer, Marcus appeared around the side of the house, having heard the commotion. He took one look at Danny and his expression hardened. "You need to leave now." "Marcus, wait." Emma started, but Danny was already talking. "Please, Mr. Hawthorne, I know I have no right to ask, but I need more time. They're going to kill me if I don't pay them back. You should have thought of that before you gambled away the money I gave you." Marcus's voice was ice cold. Emma felt something break inside her chest. "Money you gave him?" She looked between the two men, understanding beginning to dawn like a nightmare. "What money?" The silence stretched between them, heavy with guilt and betrayal. Marcus couldn't meet her eyes, and Danny was shaking like a leaf in the wind. "Danny," Emma's voice was deadly quiet. "What money?" "Em, I can explain." "What money?" The scream tore from her throat, raw and desperate. Danny collapsed onto the porch steps, his face in his hands. "The $5,000. Mr. Hawthorne paid me $5,000 so you'd come work for him." Emma felt the world disappear beneath her feet. She staggered backward, her hand pressed to her mouth. "You sold me," she whispered. "It wasn't like that. You sold me!" Emma's voice cracked with the force of her anguish. "You sold me like I was livestock." "Emma, please." Marcus stepped toward her, but she whirled on him with fury blazing in her eyes. "And you!" The betrayal in her voice cut through him like a blade. "You let me believe you hired me because you needed help. You let me think I was worth something, that I had value beyond—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "Emma, it's not what you think." "What I think?" Emma's laugh was bitter and broken. "I think I was naive enough to believe that someone actually wanted me around for who I am, not because they owned me." "Nobody owns you," Marcus said desperately. "That's not how this works." "Then how does it work, Marcus?" Emma's voice was shaking with rage and pain. "Did you pay by the month, by the year? What did $5,000 buy you exactly?" Marcus flinched as if she'd slapped him. "It bought you safety. It bought you a place to heal and grow and figure out what you wanted from life. No, it bought you a housekeeper who couldn't leave because she had nowhere else to go." Emma's voice broke on the last word. "It bought you someone who would be grateful enough to stay no matter what. That's not true, and you know it." "Do I?" Emma wiped tears from her cheeks with the back of her hand. "Because right now I don't know what's true anymore." "How long were you planning to keep this from me?" "Forever." Marcus's silence was answer enough. "Oh God," Emma whispered, the full weight of her situation crashing down on her. "I've been living a lie. Everything I felt, everything I thought was growing between us. It was all built on a lie." "Emma, my feelings for you are real," Marcus said quietly. "Whatever brought you here, what I feel for you now has nothing to do with money or obligation." "How can you say that?" Emma's voice was raw with pain. "How can you claim to care about me when you've been lying to me every single day?" "Because I was protecting you." "From what? The truth? My own choices?" Emma shook her head, her dark hair falling around her face like a curtain. "You took away my agency, Marcus. You made me a commodity in a transaction I didn't even know existed." Danny stood up from the steps, his face streaked with tears. "Em, please. I was trying to save you. Those people, they would have hurt you. They would have—" "Stop." Emma held up a hand, her voice deadly calm. "Just stop. I don't want to hear any more lies about how this was for my own good." She turned and walked toward the house, but Marcus caught her arm. "Emma, don't go. Let's talk about this." She looked down at his hand on her arm, then up at his face. "Let go of me. Emma, I said let go of me." There was steel in her voice now, a strength that made Marcus drop his hand immediately. Emma disappeared into the house and Marcus turned to Danny with fury in his eyes. "You son of a bitch, you promised you'd stay away." "I didn't have a choice," Danny's voice cracked. "They found me, Marcus. They're coming for her whether I'm here or not. Then you should have kept running instead of coming here and destroying what she'd built." "What she'd built?" Danny laughed bitterly. "You mean the fantasy you created for her? The life built on a lie?" Marcus grabbed Danny by the shirt, his knuckles white with rage. That wasn't a lie. She was happy here. She was safe. She was a prisoner who didn't know she was in a cage. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He released Danny and stepped back, the truth of it settling in his chest like a stone. Inside the house, Emma was throwing her few belongings into her battered suitcase, her movements sharp and mechanical. Every item she touched felt contaminated now. The clothes Marcus had bought her when she'd mentioned needing warmer things, the books he'd given her from his wife's collection, the small treasures she'd accumulated during her weeks at the ranch. She could hear the men talking outside, their voices raised in argument, but she couldn't make out the words. It didn't matter. Nothing they said could change what they'd done to her. Marcus appeared in the doorway of her room, his face pale with devastation. "Emma, please don't leave like this." "How should I leave, Marcus? Should I thank you for your generosity? Should I be grateful that you gave me such a comfortable cage? This was never a cage. You were free to leave any time you wanted." Emma spun around to face him, her green eyes blazing. "Was I? Was I really free when I had nowhere to go and no money to get there? When I didn't even know the truth about why I was here?" Marcus had no answer for that. "I trusted you," Emma continued, her voice breaking. "I started to care about you. I thought maybe I'd found something real for the first time in my life. But it was all built on a transaction. I was just another business deal." "You were never just a business deal to me. Then why didn't you tell me the truth?" Marcus struggled to find words. "Because I was afraid you'd leave. Because I was selfish and I wanted you to stay. So you decided to lie to me instead of giving me the choice." "Yes," Marcus said quietly, "and I was wrong. I was so wrong, Emma." Emma closed her suitcase and lifted it from the bed. "Yes, you were." She moved toward the door, but Marcus stepped aside to let her pass. "Where will you go?" "I don't know, but that's my choice to make, isn't it?" Outside, Danny was pacing beside his car, his face etched with panic. "Em, you can't leave. It's not safe out there. It's not safe anywhere, Danny, not with you in my life." Emma's voice was calm, but there was finality in it that made both men step back. "Emma, please." Marcus tried one more time. "No." She turned to face him, and Marcus saw that her tears had stopped. In their place was a strength he hadn't seen before, a core of steel that had been forged in the fire of betrayal. "I'm done being saved by men who think they know what's best for me. I'm done being protected from my own choices." She threw her suitcase into the back of Danny's car and got into the passenger seat. Drive, Danny. Take me to town. I'll figure out the rest myself." As the car pulled away from the ranch, Marcus stood in the yard watching the woman he'd come to love disappear into the distance. Behind him, the house that had finally felt like a home again seemed to echo with emptiness. The ranch was quiet now, the only sound the wind moving through the grass and the distant call of a hawk circling overhead. Marcus looked at his hands, the same hands that had written the check that brought Emma to him, the same hands that had held her when she cried about her parents, the same hands that had reached for her just moments ago, only to have her pull away. He'd saved her from one kind of prison only to create another, and in doing so he'd lost the only woman who'd made him feel alive since Sarah's death. The irony wasn't lost on him. In trying to protect Emma from being bought and sold, he'd done exactly that himself. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. It was beautiful, the kind of sunset Sarah had always loved, the kind Emma had started to love too, but Marcus couldn't feel its beauty anymore. All he could feel was the weight of his choices and the crushing loneliness of a man who'd had everything and thrown it away. Inside the house, Emma's coffee cup still sat on the kitchen table, half full and growing cold. The flowers she'd picked that morning were beginning to wilt in their vase, and the smell of the bread she'd baked was starting to fade. The ranch was quiet again, just as it had been before Emma arrived, but now Marcus knew what he'd lost, and the silence felt like a punishment he deserved.